So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Now, before we get into it, I just want to start off with a short land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory, which remains the homeland of the Mi'kmaq Nation. The territory is covered by the Covenant Chain of Treaties of Peace and Friendship signed between 1725 and 1779. The treaties are a living arrangement that establish the rules for an ongoing treaty relationship between nations. We pay respect to the knowledge embedded in the Mi'kmaq custodians of the lands and waters, and to the elders past, present, and future. All right, so welcome to our Building Wealth presentation. So my name's Alex. I'm a financial planner with TD Wealth, and I'm here today with my colleague Mitch, a fellow financial planner. Now, we're here today to explore multiple ways to help build wealth. TD's mission is really to help Canadians build confidence by providing access to different tools and programs that can increase financial skills and knowledge. Now, this particular session aims to provide you with valuable insights and, importantly, practical tips when setting short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term savings goals. Now, we have this wonderful opportunity today to have you all as a live audience, and your attendance means that you've already taken that foundational step towards educating yourselves on how to build your savings. Now, on the screen, you're going to see our focuses for today's presentation. We've divided it up into 4 different topics. So first things first, we're going to spend some time talking about the importance of goal setting and different circumstances to consider. Next, we're going to discuss the variety of savings and investment plan options that are out there. We won't have time to touch on every single one of them, but we'll touch on a few key different types of investment plan options. Then third, we're going to cover the basic types of investment and asset classes. And finally, we'll wrap up with the different types of income you can gain from those different investment choices. All right, so we're going to get into our first section, which is looking at savings goals and the importance of setting different time horizons for your savings. Now, setting different time horizons is crucial for effective financial planning. So you're going to see here we've divided it up into short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term types of goals. Now, shorter-term goals are those that you aim to achieve in the very near future. So they typically involve smaller amounts of money, and they're more immediate in nature. So some examples might include, your rainy day savings, emergency savings, saving for a vacation that you're taking maybe in the next year or so, paying off credit debt from a large purchase maybe on your credit card, or buying a new appliance because something broke. Now, intermediate-term goals fall somewhere between short-term and long-term, and those typically involve a little bit larger sums of money compared to short-term goals, but they're still within a relatively close time frame. So these could be things like, saving for a down payment on a home within the next couple of years, maybe purchasing a car, or funding a major home renovation. Now, finally, we get to our long-term goals, which involve much more planning and saving over an extended period of time. So these often require much larger sums of money, and they aim to secure either your financial future or fulfilling a major life objective. So, you're probably familiar with saving for retirement, maybe funding a child's education, which can start, right when they're born, or just building financial wealth for independence. Now, by setting goals across these different time horizons, you can create a plan that's really focused on addressing your needs at every single different stage. All right, so now that we've touched on setting goals based on different time horizons, I want to explore the 2 primary methods that people use to save. So the first one is called lump sum savings. So this is when you deposit a single amount of money into a savings account or investment account. So it often happens when you receive, a large influx of cash. So maybe it's a work bonus, a good tax refund, or maybe even an inheritance. So the advantage of this lump sum savings is that you get that immediate boost to your savings or investment portfolio. However, it does require that you have the funds available all at once, which is not always possible. Now, the second method of saving is called periodic saving. So this is the concept of saving money on a regular basis at a frequency of your choosing. A lot of people will do it, saving a little bit off of each paycheck. So the advantages to this method include building discipline in your savings habits and just the act of continually saving and contributing to the growth of your savings. Now, whether you opt for lump sum savings, periodic savings, or even a combination of both, the key is just to establish a strategy that supports your financial objectives and helps you achieve them over time. Now, speaking of achieving goals, we'll turn our focus to an example of the difference between lump sum and periodic using our fictitious friends, John and Andrew, who both want to retire in 30 years' time. So in this scenario, John has decided to start saving immediately. So he didn't have a lump sum large amount of savings to put aside, so he started with periodic savings of $500 a month, deposited into his investment account, earning a 5% rate of return each year. Now he continued to save that $500 a month for the next 10 years, contributing a total of $60,000. At that point, he stopped his contributions and he left the money that he accumulated in the investment account to grow for the remaining 20 years before his retirement. Now his friend Andrew did not want to start saving at the same time as John. However, 10 years went by, he realized retirement was only 20 years away, and he decided that he needed to start saving at this point. So he sold his car, he used his annual bonus, and even some of his vacation savings, and he came up with a lump sum deposit of the same amount, $60,000, to try and catch up to his friend John. Now, this $60,000 lump sum was then invested at 5% over the next 20 years. Now, fast forward to the end of 30 years, where at the time where they both want to retire, both John and Andrew check their account, and we see that John's account may have grown to over 200,000, while Andrew's account may have grown to just shy of 160,000. So it's important to note that they both actually contributed the same amount of money, that $60,000, but the difference was a staggering almost $43,000 more for John, who had started contributing earlier on. So this example here, it just goes to show the importance of saving over the long term to give our money the opportunity to compound over time and really maximize our return. Okay, so now that we've talked about setting savings goals, I'm going to pass it over to Mitch to share some information about the different types of savings plans.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go into types of savings plans, and I'm going to make this as fun as possible, and I'm going to use analogies. I typically like to sort of use analogies to make it a little more tangible and relatable, if that makes sense. So let's get into it. Types of savings plans really are, the analogy I'm going to use is the types of savings plans is like a vehicle, all right? And the types of investments or solutions or whatever you can you invest in is like the passenger of your vehicle. So I'm talking today more so about the vehicle, and Alex is going to kind of end this call here today with the passengers of the vehicle and touch a little bit more about that. So vehicles, what are the options? How do we save money? And what Alex just mentioned there, what types of accounts can we compound our money and utilize, for various goals, right? Those short, medium, long-term goals. And these are just some of the, types at our disposal. Basically, the government plans, whatever, the difference between TFSA and RSP, and I'll get into it here in a second. Really, the underlying, theme with most of these is they offer some tax benefit, whether it's deferring your taxes or rebating them or completely or sheltering them completely. They offer tax benefits essentially to you, and it's up to you to utilize them with your planner, with your wealth advisor, etc. There's these plans, and then there's also what are kind of on a standalone island, a separate vehicle that you'd own is a non-registered account. That doesn't offer the same sort of tax savings and abilities that the other registered accounts have. But each of them, the non-registered and even the registered, just the two different sort of buckets, they each offer benefits and should be considered entirely, all of them, to have a well-rounded plan. Understanding how these options work can really help align your short, medium, and long-term goals and sort of a perfect harmony across all these types of accounts. So let's explore each of them here. And we'll start with sort of a hot one, and one that's sort of a point of conversation I find a lot with my customers, and sort of, nearing retirement or maybe, saving up to it. It's the RRSP, and that's the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. So really the main advantage with an RRSP, contributions that you make to the RRSP are tax deductible, meaning that they reduce your taxable income for the year in which they are made. And also within the first 60 days. We do have the first 60 days of the year. That's coming up. It's kind of a time right now that Alex and I are called to action more often than the other months, just where a lot of people are sort of doing final RSP contributions to gain a bit of a tax break come April, May when they file their taxes. So it reduces your taxable income. That's the main thing about RSP. And then also, while you make contributions to the RSP, what Alex just mentioned, your funds can grow tax sheltered. So if you earn $10,000 in 1 year in your RSP, you pay no tax on that gain in value of your underlying wealth within the RSP immediately. You do eventually on the back end when you convert your RSP and use it as an income source eventually. Get into that a little bit here, but I'm going to mention more so the benefits of the RSP and sort of perks and features. One of them is the home buyers plan. Some of us on the call may own a home, may have used the first time home buyer plan as a withdrawal from our RSP. It's basically like a feature you have in your RSP that allows you to borrow almost from yourself to go and use as leverage and buy a home. The program allows you to withdraw up to $60,000 for a down payment for each, of your and your spouse's RSPs without incurring taxes, provided that you repay funds into your RSP over the required amount of time. And that required amount of time is roughly 1/15 of the balance for 15 years kind of thing. So that's the repayment on the home buyer's RSP. Another benefit is if you're returning to school or if you're going to school, you can access your RRSP money as what's called a lifelong learning plan, LLP. The plan basically permits you to make a withdrawal to finance education for you or your spouse or common law partner. And like the homebuyer withdraw, the lifelong learning plan withdrawals are tax-free if they're repaid within a specific time frame. So sort of like side doors, if you will, to your RRSP. The main feature and benefits of the RRSP being you get a tax break up front for what you put into your RRSP. And then you also get the long-term growth and benefits of sheltering. Like I mentioned before, that hypothetical $10,000 you've earned in 1 year, it's sheltered in gains and taxation for that year. So the RSP is a big one. We could do one entire call on RSPs, truthfully. So I'm really just scratching the surface here. But if any other further questions, let us know. Happy to get into it. But for today's sake and for time's sake, we'll move on to tax-free savings now, if that sounds good. Another big one, of course, TFSAs, tax-free savings accounts. They're super versatile, right? They're a savings tool that's really designed it could do it all, right? So short term, if you want to save for 1 year, you could do that in like a low interest cash account within your vehicle, right? Remember, we're talking about vehicles here. You could also do, medium term. You could do sort of something for 2 to 3 years, or most certainly, and what we'll, promote and advocate is you can save in your tax-free savings for the long term for sure. And we've seen the benefit of doing so. And in that scenario where she just mentioned John and Andrew, I think their names were, those types of savings habits, whether it's lump sum or regular or a combination of both, your tax-free is a really powerful place to do that. And so really the main advantage of the tax-free is that any income or growth from qualified investments earned within the account. So that includes interest, dividends, capital gains. They're all tax-free. That's now, that's in the future. It's entirely tax-free. So you won't pay any taxes on the growth of your investments, which of course allows your savings to grow more efficiently over time, right? So there are conditions with the tax-free savings, right? We each get, all of us on the call here, we get, come January 1st, Happy New Year, we all get $7,000 worth of room that we can add to our tax-free savings account. It's a little different than the RSP, and like I mentioned, the RSP we could do a whole call on, but the tax-free savings is a little more simple. It's $7,000 per year that we're granted or can use with our tax-free savings as a contribution or money that we can fund our individual tax-free savings accounts, right? So the total amount from when tax-free savings came out in 2009, I believe, it's been building every year. So whether or not, if you know it or not, you have room if you're above the age of 18, or if you had turned above the age of 18 since that date, 2009, we all have room probably, unless we have a fully funded tax-free savings account. The total amount of room, if you were above the age of 18 in 2009, haven't added a penny to your tax-free, would be 102,000 Canadian dollars is what you could fund or add to your tax-free savings, right? So, and then next year, this will get the 7,000, so it'll be 109,000, quick math. So that's kind of the TFSA. I have some stats on the tax-free savings, which I find really interesting. The average unused contribution room in the tax-free savings account, this is as of 2023, is about 50,000. And the average fair market value per individual, so how much money or how much each individual's tax-free savings account is in Canada. Mind you, there are lots of different walks of life, understanding that, different ages, different life scenarios. But the average fair market value per individual in a tax-free savings account is only 33,000. So this is a type of registered account that en masse is being underutilized by Canadians. And Alex and I will today, tomorrow, and in the future always advocate funding our tax-free savings accounts, right? Moving on to the first home savings account, third type of registered option. This is a new one. So this is sort of in the same breath or thread of the home buyers plan withdrawal I mentioned from the registered retirement savings plan. I mentioned you have to repay back into that plan. It's basically like a loan. This is the RSP I'm talking about. A loan you make to yourself that you have to repay. This is an account that was opened up, the First Home Savings account, in 2023. It's a very new account. It's sort of as a way to simplify that first home buying process. Alex, maybe you can attest to this, and maybe you've seen it as well, but the home buyer can get a little messy, if you will. Not messy, but it does create an obligation to repay it. So I believe they'd created this account as a way to sort of simplify, streamline it, and make it a little more accessible for people to save for, this major goal that most of us have, and that is to, become a homeowner in Canada, right? So First Home Savings account's a great new account, like I mentioned, 2023. You can add up to $8,000 per year into the account. It acts the same as the registered retirement savings plan. So any dollar you put into the account, you get as a deduction to your taxable income. So if you were to add $8,000 into the First Home Savings account this year, let's say, before the new year, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you'll get that $8,000 back as a deduction to your income, right? So here's the big key, and why I'd say wink, wink, nudge, nudge, is that contribution room starts accumulating only when your First Home Savings account is open. So I had just mentioned that tax-free savings where we all get $7,000 just for being around and being 18 years old, above the age of 18. Well, it's a different mechanism with the First Home Savings. You actually have to open in a First Home Savings account first to start gaining the contribution, and you have to qualify as a first-time home buyer to participate in the plan, essentially, and to fully utilize it to fund and then withdraw and buy a home. So you can only carry forward $8,000 per calendar year, and the maximum on this account, if you're to save up, is $40,000. So you can save $40,000, you get $40,000 as a deduction to your income, which is great. You get that money back likely come tax time. So it's not just $40,000. If you were to fund it, you'd get tax savings back as well. And you can take that $40,000 and use it as a down payment for your first home purchase, right? So, this kind of combines it's a combination of the benefits of, tax-free growth and, kind of like it's like a TFSA and an RSP kind of mixed together. There are specific features and benefits, but just keeping it general for today, it comes down to every individual person where we would, see what makes sense, what contributions make the most amount of sense for you. So keep in mind, this is definitely a new one. We're learning more about it as it goes, but really powerful registered account or vehicle for you to save and, buy your home, of course, your first home. So moving on to the last but not least, and so this is sort of that other vehicle I'd mentioned where, this is one that offers no such sort of upfront tax breaks or safe havens like I had mentioned in those last three accounts. It's a little more straightforward. So, it's different. There's no sort of contribution amounts or limits to this non-registered. Typically, we'll advise on a non-registered if we've sort of checked off the boxes for registered accounts. So if you've fully funded your TFSAs, your RSPs, maybe you've got some group, savings plans, and I'll touch on that here in a second. Typically, just by default and from process of elimination, we'll move to a non-registered where, there's not, like the tax-free, it's not completely sheltered. Like the RSP, there's no tax breaks, but a non-registered still offers great benefits in that, whatever you're earning or saving within the non-registered excess funds, there's no limits on those contributions. So you could add, X amount of money, however much you want to a non-registered, and you can, it's a vehicle once again, and you can pick your passengers kind of thing, right? So yeah, that's kind of the non-registered in a real quick nutshell. Different than the registered, doesn't offer those tax kind of benefits up front, but it's a great account, and it's, once again, it's kind of it should be included in, what should be a perfect harmony of your wealth, your short, medium, long-term goals, and your vehicle, your savings vehicles. So yeah, moving on, kind of other savings plans. These are miscellaneous plans and sort of extra ones, or not extra, but other ones that are more specific to life circumstances. So the first big two are other R accounts, the registered types of accounts. So the first one would be a registered education savings plan, which it's right in the name, right? It's for the purpose of saving for education, right? A qualified post-secondary school for your child's education, or if you're a grandparent, maybe your grandchild's education, or maybe even a friend of yours down the block or what have you. You can create your own registered education savings plan for that goal. Really, you put simply, RSP contributions grow tax deferred, just like RRSPs. And withdrawals are taxed in the hands of the student or beneficiary for post-secondary education, and typically at a lower rate. So RESPs are a really great way to sort of shift the tax liability from you, maybe let's say mom or dad, who is likely in a higher tax bracket, to your child, who's probably not in as high of a tax bracket, even if higher than first tax bracket, maybe second. It's a way to shift that wealth from you to your child. So higher taxable income earner to lower taxable income earner. So RESPs are great. Great benefit to RESPs as well is they are matched 20 cents for every dollar, depending on your household income, from the government of Canada. We kind of like to refer to this as free money. And kind of along the same thread was what Alex mentioned, it compounds and grows within an RESP. So it can be a really powerful account. Free money, shift tax liability from high to low, and it funds future education. What's better than that? And then the second one here, registered disability savings plan. This is for an individual who has a registered disability, or could be part of a family situation. I find a lot of our DSP conversations are sort of with other family members. It's much more kind of, how should I say, it's kind of more cooperative, I find, these RDSPs, in that for the most part, like the RESP, they offer grants and benefits from the government of Canada as well, free money, right? And for the most part, it's sort of, the idea is, the idea there is to fund someone who has a registered disability, who has severe prolonged impairments, or who would qualify for the disability tax credit in general, the ability to save and make non-deductible contributions, tax-deductible contributions to your RDSP. Along the same lines, offers growth, free money, sheltered growth, and yeah, really, it's a powerful account. A lot less, common for sure, but if you do qualify or are considering this, let us know. We're happy to chat about it. It's a really, really powerful account for those who qualify for sure. Moving on here, we'll chat about this. This is probably pretty applicable to most people. A lot of people talk about this and either have one or are contributing pension plans. This is one that's more employer sponsored, right? So this is led by your employer, of course, right? And they come in two main forms: a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan. Defined benefit plans, DB plans, are your employer basically guarantees a specific retirement benefit based on a formula that considers things such as your history and years of service. The employer bears most of the investment, if not all the investment risk here, and they're responsible for funding the promised benefits of a defined benefit plan, right? So it offers basically a predictable stream of income in retirement. Second to that is the defined contribution plan. So this operates more kind of like an individual savings account. Employees, in some cases, and sometimes employers contribute to a percentage of your salary to this plan, which then can be invested in a range of different options for investments, and chosen by you, the employee, right? So these are kind of the difference. There's DB, DC plans. Know what kind of plan you have, and it's good to chat about with your planner about, what that turns into and what that becomes. It's all well and good while you're participating, but to see the other side of it is important. And what we'll advocate is, work with your planner and figure out what that looks like, right? There is portability on these plans. So defined contributions, they offer a little more portability. You have, the ability to, you have control over your individual accounts. And if you change jobs, you could, move it over or combine it with your new employer's plan. So they're both important accounts. More employers are leaning towards DC plans than DB. So once again, just let us know if you have questions or want to dive deeper into this. We're happy to chat about it. But good to know what you're in and how it works for sure. And then one of the last slides here, as far as other this is the miscellaneous slide. So there's other plans like deferred profit share plan, and also employee savings plans, various other employee and employer plans that are offered. There's a few different ones we can get into. DPSPs, so deferred profit share plans, are ones where basically your employer shares a portion of the company's profits with the employee. It's actually an optional account for your employer to add money into. It's basically like when times are good and the company's doing well, they'll reward the employees, or they have the option to, and that's when they'll open up these DPSPs. So could be pretty common, honestly, with engineers. I think in the past there have been DPSPs with an engineer who works at this company or like a private company that has profits, or a public that wants to add money to it. So yeah, consider this. These are other types of accounts, not as common as like a group RRSP. That's pretty common, a little bit more common than the DPSP. And I'm sorry to throw all these acronyms out. Trust me, I work in this business. It's we get tired of the acronyms, but there's different types of savings plans with your employer. This is just another one of them, but it's more so profit sharing kind of thing is really what it is. And then other employee savings plans, get to know sort of your company, what they offer, or the employer with, and or whoever you may be with in the future. ESPs are more so kind of like payroll deductions. So it could be like, you add a portion, that your employer adds a portion. It could be broken down in different types of vehicles, but keep that in mind, and just wanted to note that. And so, yeah, moving on to the last slide here. I had mentioned, once again, to kind of tie the analogy together, the vehicles. I'd gone through the different types of vehicles, but now I want to explore, now Alex is going to explore with you guys more about the passengers of said vehicles and what you can put in these different types of accounts I mentioned, registered, non-registered. So I'll let Alex take it from here.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, so like he said, the types of investments that we're going to talk about today, we're just going to touch on 3 major categories. So there will be things you'll see that we won't chat about, but absolutely they're the type of things that you can reach out to us to ask more. The types that we're going to talk about are cash, guaranteed investment certificates, or GICs as they're more commonly known, and mutual funds. And each of these passengers can be held in the different vehicles that we were talking about earlier. So there's no, set type of investment that has to be, held in certain accounts. There certainly are types of investments that can't be held in certain accounts, but they're much more, granular and specific. But if we're speaking in generalities, the 3 types of investments we're going to talk about can be held in different combinations in those different types of vehicles. So, we talked about, our different types of accounts. I mentioned these 3. It's important to note that you don't have to choose just one. And that's the really nice thing here is diversification is a really, really great thing. And we look at choosing the right combination based on your individual risk appetite. And that can be a challenge, and it can change over time. Everybody wants to make the most they possibly can on their investments, but there's always, there can be a risk that you take with different types. So it's sort of balancing out, how to get the most out of your money, how to get it working really hard for you without taking any more risk than you can handle. You don't want to be, waking up in the middle of the night because you're worried about, how your investment did that day. That's not a good thing. That's not a feeling we ever want anyone to have. And so that's why we look, a big part of what Mitch and I do is looking at, what's that right mix or combination for each of our clients individually. So we're going to start with the simplest type of investment. I know many people wouldn't consider it necessarily an investment, but it is part of that, of a savings strategy, and that's cash. So this is, anyone who's got just your average regular savings account with funds set aside, that's considered to be a cash investment. So with cash, funds they're not locked in, they're very easily withdrawn. So we do see this a lot for people's, rainy day or emergency funds, where, these would be cash would be a great option if it's money that you needed access to immediately. If you're a landlord and your tenant's dishwasher breaks and it needs to be replaced ASAP, this is the type of thing that could be considered for something like that. Now, these types, of course, with cash, they have minimal, if no risk, but they also, in that regard, tend to have the lowest rate of return. So something to keep in mind there. Now, the next common investment type that we're going to talk about is a guaranteed investment certificate, or GIC. So these are low risk investments because your principal, or the amount that you choose to invest, is always secure. You know that you're going to lock in these funds for a period of time, and at the absolute worst, you're going to get the amount that you invested back. So GICs offer predictable rates of return because they're shielded from those different market fluctuations, and then they allow different options for time horizons. So because you're locking in your money, we make sure that there's different options for you, ranging all the way from 30 days up to 5 years. Now, the last most common type of investment we're going to talk about is a mutual fund. So this type of investment is basically a pool of money from multiple investors, allowing you to invest in a diversified portfolio that contains a mixture of stocks, bonds, sometimes even cash, GICs, and other assets. So it offers diversification because it spreads out the risk across those different investment categories. So rather than being exposed to all stocks or all bonds or all cash, you get to pool your money with a bunch of other investors, and you get a little bit of a piece of this much larger pie. Now, it's important to note that mutual funds, they are professionally managed by fund managers. So it's people's job, to come in every day and manage these pools of money, make sure that they're on track to do what they've said that they're going to do. So they research, they analyze markets, and because of this, those funds generally do charge management fees for their service, and it varies depending on what type of fund you're choosing. Now, compared to GICs and savings accounts, mutual funds are, of course, riskier, but in contrast, they can offer higher rates of return. So again, I'll just point out that this list of 3 is certainly not an exhaustive list, and definitely excludes things like, stocks and bonds and ETFs and things like that, that I'm sure you're all familiar with. But like I said, feel free to reach out to either of us if you have questions on any of those things. We're always happy to help there. Okay, so we've come to the end of the meat and potatoes of our presentation. So I want to just wrap up here by highlighting a few of the key takeaways. So first, review your financial goals on a regular basis. Make sure that they're relevant, they're achievable. So, we all have lofty aspirations, but try and set a goal for yourself that's achievable, knowing that you can adjust it and change it over time, and make sure that it's aligned with your evolving needs. So, a goal you set today might be different a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that's something that why we definitely recommend to revisit regularly. Now you can conduct monthly assessments to track your progress if you want on your short-term goals, since that's sort of the timing that works for something that's short-term. For long-term goals, we recommend dedicating time once a year, sort of like your annual checkup with your doctor. Think of it sort of that way, where you do a little bit of a deep dive, make sure that everything is still on track the way that you want it, and make any adjustments as necessary. And finally, and I'd say probably most importantly, is don't forget to celebrate different milestones as you progress through your savings. I know sometimes it feels like it's never enough, and as soon as we hit one milestone, we want the next, and we move on pretty quickly for that that feeling of instant gratification. But if you've hit one of your goals and achieved something that you've been working really hard to achieve, celebrate it. And I'm sure Mitch would say the same thing, but when we do financial planning for clients, like we build in those rewards and celebrations, to be able to, treat yourself every once in a while and make sure that, you're working hard. You also need to be able to enjoy the savings that you're building for yourself and other people. So don't forget that piece.
I'll add something. I usually like to say, like, we're doing all this to spend money, really, actually. But it's just in the most sort of efficient way possible, and make sure that you now and you later is covered, kind of thing. So yeah, the wins are huge. I especially like to celebrate those, and like you mentioned, Alex, that's a huge motivating factor for us. Absolutely.
Good time. Yeah. So I mean, just remember that at TD, aka myself and Mitch, we're always here to help. Our partners at the branch are as well. So if you haven't already, check out our website to learn a little bit more. There's some nice articles, some customer story videos where you can puts it into context. You can see some real life examples. It allows you on this site to book an appointment at the branch if you like, or like we've been saying, you'll probably get our contact information at the end here. Feel free to shoot either of us an email or a phone call, and we're happy to, get into the weeds with anyone's, specific questions or personal scenarios. That's what we're here for. So we hope to hear from some of you after this, certainly. And last but not least, before we get into the questions, on behalf of myself and Mitch, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and listening. And I guess we'll pass it back over to our host to field some questions.
All right, great. Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat here. So I'll just read them out for you. As Mitch kind of said, there's a lot of acronyms, so I will do my best here. So the first question that we have is, question on HBP from RRSP. Can you do it more than once? And if I wanted to purchase a rental property?
I'll tackle this. I'll answer it partly because truthfully, I don't know the full answer, but I know you can. It's still within your limit. So the 60,000 is the 60,000. But I'm pretty sure you can re-access the home buyer's plan withdrawal, but you have to re-qualify as a home buyer again, right? So it's 4 years, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's 4 years if you are not a homeowner, like if you've sold your home in this case, and 4 years goes by of like living whatever, as in an apartment or not a homeowner, you have no property, you would then requalify and you could reuse the home buyer's plan for sure. But I mean, truthfully, I'd argue like maybe we should start doing first home savings depending on your scenario, right? Like maybe the home buyer's plan withdrawal is great if that's kind of all you have. It's just your RSP and like there's no other TFSA or there's no other non-registered. It's just all you have, and that's all you can leverage for a down payment. Then we're kind of restricted to that home buyer's plan withdrawal. So to kind of answer to bring it back here, to answer the question, you can, but you'd have to requalify for as a first time home buyer to do the home buyer's plan withdrawal from your RRSP. Hopefully that helps and answers the question.
The other thing I would add to that as well is there's certain criteria related to whether it's your primary residence or a rental. I believe it needs to be your primary residence, at least for a period of time before you can then move out, turn around, and rent it. Sure. So yeah. Another piece to be cognizant of as well.
This, yeah, 100%. I would say this is closer also to, this is where we'd kind of harmonize with CRA as well, see sort of how that, what your taxes were last year and where you're at. And, we'll touch, I would, in this question of this scenario, touch on that again and go to work to see if you do qualify and if that is a viable option for you to take advantage of that again, for sure.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder for those on the call, you are able to type questions into the chat. You can also raise your hand and ask them as well. We will be providing both Alex and Mitch's contact information in the survey if you did want to reach out to them directly. There is another question in the chat here. It says, if you already own a home, is there a reset to be able to utilize it based on when you purchased your home, or can it be used for your children?
Is this in the same thread as the first-time home buyer? I think maybe
it is not. It
Yes.
is a different person. Oh, or...
Just same program though.
Okay, good question. Same program, home buyer withdrawal. And what was the question again? More specifically for your family members, like other members?
Yeah, for first-time home buyers. So are you able to use that for your children so that they're able to use it at a later date?
That's a good question. I think it's for your own individual RSP, for your own first-time home buying qualification, you or your spouse. I don't believe you can utilize it for your children's home purchase. I'd have to
aside from the RSP though, just the first-time home buyers account.
The FHSA, you mean the first home savings account? Possibly?
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, absolutely. You can help fund that for your kid. You know what I mean? Like you could help gift money and then they could utilize the first home savings account. I don't know specifically if you can use your own first home savings.
18 yet?
Yeah, then they might have to hang on. You could use something that you could do. There's other options around that. You know what I mean? Because remember, the FHSA decreases your taxable income. So if they don't have taxable income, I guess you would be trying to participate in the benefit and then fund the house for them. Is kind of the question I see.
Yes.
But no, yeah. I believe it's individual FHSA for your own purchase, for your own home. I don't think you can use it for your child in this sense. But this is where like the RESP, like I'd mentioned, kind of achieves that, where you go from high income earner, you save some of that and move it to your child. Now, did they buy a house? This is where I'd ask more like, how old are they? When are they buying a house? Or when realistically, how much do we want to buy the house for? How much do we want to put down on the house? Things like that. But there are tools and methods to do so. I'd say, the first home savings could be one, but for them individually for that goal, and you for your individual goal there. So, but there's, this is a great question, like how to gift wealth to your children, right? I'm happy to chat a little bit more about that, kind of one-on-one, if hopefully that helps kind of answer the question a little bit.
Thank you.
Great. There is a comment for the next one. It says, FYI, there are many newcomers and world travelers in this chat. You may want to give a heads up to folks regarding the contribution room reduction of registered accounts in case they were non-tax paying citizens or non-Canadians even when older than 18.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely important to consider. I know even for myself, after I turned 18, I moved and I was a permanent resident in another country for a few years. And during those few years where I wasn't a permanent resident in Canada, I actually didn't accumulate any tax-free savings account room in that period. So, my particular total, even though I was, 18 and mostly lived in Canada, is not going to be quite that same amount. So, to that point, it's definitely individual, to everybody's circumstances. So, it's easy to make that, sort of general calculation for someone who's been 18 and lived here, the whole time since 2009. But that's where we get into the CRA and I recommend, if you don't have an account already, a MyCRA online account. It's a great account just to set up with your most recent tax return info. And when you log in, it'll actually allow you to see your specific TFSA contribution room, RRSP contribution room. TFSA is specific to residency and age, but a little more, uniform in terms of the amount that the government grants, RSP room is going to be based on your income from the previous year. So that will be, probably pretty drastically different between each person. But when in doubt, that would be absolutely the right place to check. At tax time, when everybody submits their taxes, part of the notice of assessment that you'll receive back will show you each of those contribution carry forward rooms. So I know a big part of our plans before we ever contribute to anyone's RSP or TFSA is getting our clients to go on to their CRA or call or check their tax return to make sure that we're not putting too much in or on the other end, not enough. There are penalties for over contributing. You get a nice letter from CRA to tell you, so don't worry, they'll tell you, and it can be fixed. But yeah, we always like to double check that. So that's a great comment.